Hi, I'm Holly Smith. I'm a pediatric speech therapist, and I'm the owner of Play and Say. We are a pediatric speech therapy center in Hammond. We do have an office in Hammond where we see clients, and we also have therapists, including myself, that travel to see clients in Tangipahoa Parish, Washington Parish, St. Tammany Parish, and Livingston Parish. So we do home visits as well as sessions in the office. So we recently on our social media accounts started promoting a possible camp for this summer for picky eaters. And we are still assessing interest for that camp. So actually, if you go to the comment section of this video, I have a link for you. You can click the link and subscribe to an email list that is specific to people who need help with picky eaters. I promise I won't bombard you with a ton of emails. I don't really have that much time to sit down and create all these emails, but it is a good place to get information about the possible camp. So if we do offer the camp, we will send some notifications through that email list. But also, when you subscribe to the email list, you're going to immediately get one email that will ask you some questions about your child. We'll ask, how old is your child? What kind of things does your child eat? What things does your child not eat that you would like for your child to eat? And also a question about what your summer schedule is like. So what we're really trying to do is get some of that information back so that we can compile all of that and create a camp that will work for the most kids. So we actually already put that link out on our Facebook page, and we got a few responses back, and that is what prompted this video. A few people reported, I think my kid is a picky eater, but I don't know if it's a problem or not. So we wanted to make a video for you guys to help kind of define picky eating. We're also going to kind of separate that from a normal picky eating stage that some kids go through. Picky eating that's more problematic. And then there are some cases where we have actually a feeding disorder. Those kids, we can help those kids, but they probably need to start with individualized treatment and individualized assessment, not in the group setting. This group camp is really specifically for picky eaters. So let's talk a little bit about some things that are normal. At about a year old, we can actually expect our babies to eat pretty much the same things that we're eating. So whatever you put on the table for dinner, for family dinner that night, you should expect your 1-year-old to be able to eat those foods. Now, you still do need to chop it up for your 1-year-old, and your 1-year-old isn't going to eat a ton of food at most sittings. So you don't have to expect them to eat a lot of it, but they should be able to eat most of the things that we eat if we chop it up well enough for them. There are a few exceptions. We're going to avoid things that are really difficult to chew, so that might include things like vegetables that are hard and raw, like carrots. A raw carrot is really hard and difficult to chew. Some meats that are kind of like a steak type meat are more difficult to chew and manage orally, so we might avoid that a little bit longer. Popcorn is a choking hazard, hot dogs. There are a few others. You could probably find a good list. I would recommend checking with the American Academy of Pediatrics. That's where I think we get the best information about the kinds of foods that our kids should eat. So, with a few exceptions, your child can probably eat most of what you're eating at the dinner table when they are a year old. We do also want to continue to avoid honey, though, because honey comes with a small risk of getting botulism, and we don't want that to happen to our 1-year-old. So I would continue to avoid honey for a little while. At 1, your child should also be drinking water, and a lot of parents introduce juice. I think we sometimes think we need to, but we don't actually have to give our kids juice. Juice has a lot of sugar in it. It fills our kids up. It kind of actually prevents them from eating solid foods. So I believe that the American Academy of Pediatrics only recommends a few ounces of juice. If your child's eating a fair amount of vegetables and fruit, they probably don't really need the juice. So that might be something that you just give sparingly. You might not need to give it at all. I try not to let my kids drink juice. Sometimes they get it as a treat, but we mostly try to stick to water and milk, and we have to kind of be careful about how much milk we're drinking too, because once we get past a year, and that's not our primary source of nutrition, milk can also decrease the appetite for solid foods. So just to reiterate, at 1 year old, with a few exceptions, our children are eating mostly what we're eating. We're still chopping it up for them. But what happens around 18 months to 3 years is that children become fearful of things that are unfamiliar to them, or they might start to be afraid of the dark or something like that. So this is normal, and it's part of normal psychological development. So it's not a surprise that some of our kids become picky sometime in this age range. So sometimes between 18 months and 3 years old, some kids will become picky about the foods that they like or that they're willing to eat. That is normal unless it's excessive, or we have a child that's not growing, or they're dehydrated, or the child has other medical or developmental issues. Then the feeding problem might be more significant, okay? What we're talking about today mostly applies to typically developing kids that are healthy. That picky eating becomes problematic and a little bit more concerning when it persists past the age of 3. So if we have a 3.5-year-old or a 4-year-old that's still pretty picky, we might be more concerned about that. That might be a person that is appropriate for our camp. We also want to make sure that our kids on a regular basis are consuming water, carbs, proteins, and fruits and vegetables. When we have a child that has eliminated a whole category, I'm concerned about their eating, and that is a child that might need treatment. If your child is a picky eater and they're eating less than 30 different foods, they probably would be a good candidate for our summer camp. I would consider a child that's over 3 years old with no developmental or health issues that's eating less than 30 foods. I would consider that a picky eater. If your child eats less than 10 or 15 foods, you might actually have a more significant problem with feeding. This might be even more than just picky eating. And I would recommend that you start with an individualized assessment and possibly individualized treatment. We really need our kids to be eating more than 10 or 15 foods. So if you think your child's picky eating is a little bit more significant than picky eating, please consider individualized evaluation and treatment. If your child's not growing, they're not gaining weight, they've been diagnosed with failure to thrive, that is also another child that I wouldn't say it's just picky eating. I would say that's more of a feeding disorder, and we need individualized treatment and assessment. Also, if your child shows any signs of choking or having difficulty chewing, that requires individualized assessment and treatment. I'm not saying that we can't help those kids that have an issue that's more significant than picky eating. We can help them. You're more than welcome to call us and seek help for that. It's just that these kids probably need to start with something that's more individualized. I don't think a group camp style format would be the best place to start for them. They may be a good candidate for a camp later once they get some more progress and success with feeding. But to start with, if your child is not gaining weight, not growing, eating less than 10 or 15 foods, showing any signs of choking, they have other developmental or medical issues, let's start with individualized assessment and treatment. If your child is over 3 years old, they're eating a little bit of every category, they're just not eating more than 30 foods, They're not always wanting to eat what you put on the dinner table. They prefer the chicken nuggets or the mac and cheese, or maybe it's a hot dog or pizza. They kind of have their highly preferred foods and they want to stick with that. But otherwise they're healthy and they're growing. That might be a picky eater. That might be somebody that's a good candidate for our camp. So I hope that helps you kind of get a better idea of whether or not your child is experiencing some picky eating that's normal, or maybe they have a little bit of picky eating and it's becoming a problem, or maybe they have more significant feeding issues. Either way, we're happy to help you. You can call or text us at 985-402-1145. You can also email us at hello@playandsay.net. If your child is the picky eater and not a more significant feeding issue, go ahead and click that link and subscribe to our email list, and make sure you reply to that first email so we can collect some good information about what your schedule is like this summer and what kind of help you need. If you're unsure where to start with your child, just give us a call and we'd be happy to talk that out and help you decide what would be best. It would be super awesome if you guys like the video or share it so that other families that might be having trouble with picky eating, they can also see this and get some help too. We would really appreciate that. Also, if you come back next week on Monday around lunchtime, we're going to post a second video that is going to give you some tips of things that you can do at home to help resolve some of the picky eating issues. If your child is a picky eater, these things, remember, if your child has more significant feeding issues or they have developmental or health problems along with the eating issues, you do need individualized treatment. So you might need some more help than just the tips that I'm going to give in the next video. Thanks for watching.